Hello and welcome to our next video, an intro to CSS. And so in this video, I'm going to kind of introduce you to some of the basic concepts of CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And so what I'm going to show you how to do is set this up, how to include the code into your HTML and some basic selectors. So as you can see here, this is the website I created in one of the previous videos. And previously we had just been working on HTML, which is the content of the web page. And I'm not going to change anything that is on my web page right now. I'm not going to add anything to it. I'm not going to take anything away from it. All I'm going to do with CSS is change the way it looks. So currently here's the page. This is the way it looks. Black text, white background, everything kind of in a default stage in the flow straight down the page. What CSS is going to do is it's going to change the way that content looks. CSS doesn't put new content on, CSS only changes the way it looks. So the first thing I'm going to do here is show you the first way to add CSS. All right, and this is called Inline Css. So inside of my H1 element here, I am going to go ahead and put in a style attribute. The style attribute gets a value that's a little bit different. It actually gets two things. I get to say what I want to change and what I want to change about it. So let's change this background color to something like, we'll go chartreuse. Now, what's nice about VS Code is it gives you this little color selector. So when I say I'm going to choose a color, it gives me a whole long list of pre-made colors. And CSS has over 170 different colors that you can use by name. But it also uses RGB values, and VS Code gives you a little color wheel here that if you hover on it, you can kind of change what color it is. I can move different shades of this green. You see this stays the original color, but as I change it, you see what it changes to, and you can kind of see that. This is transparency, and this gets off of green and goes to some other different color here. So let's go here, and you see I now have an RGB value. Red, green, blue. 0 is the lowest, 255 is the highest. More on RGB colors, if you care about them, can be found on W3 Schools. Great resource to find out anything you need to know about creating web pages. Okay, so let's see what happens when I do this. Now you see the background of my H1 has been changed. Now, if I want to change the table of contents background, guess what? I have to go in and do the same thing. I have to put another style attribute. I have to say background color. I have to give it a color. And now I refresh, and now both of them have it. Now you see how this can be very tedious to keep going in here and adding all these attributes to individual elements over and over again as we do this. So instead of adding attributes directly into the HTML, what we can do instead is go up into the head, and underneath the title, I'm going to put a style element. This style element is a container. It can hold all of my CSS. No need to go into individual places and put the style into those individual places. You can if you'd like to. If there's a small change you want to make, maybe inline CSS makes sense. But if you're going to style a whole page, you're not going to want to do that. What you're going to want to do is come up here, put a style element in, and start writing your CSS into this. So we can do the same thing, right? I can come in here if I want to change my H1s. I can change all of them. If I want to change my H2s, I can change all of them. And I do this by choosing a selector. What is it I want to change? So actually, I'm going to change the whole body. So what I've done here is I've written out a selector. this is a tag selector. So it's selecting the body tag. And these curly braces create the scope of my changes, my declaration block. All right, so what am I going to change about the body? Well, I can do a background color, and let's do cyan, and I can change the foreground color. That's the color of the fonts, color of the writing. So kind of did a mix of color and font there. We'll do color, and let's change this to, say, a dark magenta. And let's see how that changes. Now you see it applied to the entire body. Every element that was nested inside the body was changed to a background of blue. We saw before when I did just my H1, the H1 was all blue, or whatever color I had it. Now, any element that's nested in the body will descend. We'll get that descendant value. So even though I didn't style my H1s or my H2s or my paragraphs to be purple, I styled the body, and everything inside the body gets that, unless I come in and specifically say I want to change it. But notice this, these anchors did not change. The LI changed because the dots are different, right? The dots are purple or dark magenta, but the words did not change. And that's because these anchor tags already have a default specified color. And coming in here and saying I want to change the body color to dark magenta, it overrides every element that doesn't already have a default color. But the anchor tags have a default color that does not get overwritten by parent styles. So they have a specified style, and that we get into specificity, and more specific styling will override less specific. And since the anchors have a more specific style, it won't override. But I can change it by coming in here and declaring my anchor, and we'll go ahead and give that a color. And let's go ahead and make our anchors dark orange. And now when I refresh, you see all of my anchors have been turned to dark orange. And so we see that, dark orange. Okay, so those are great. Those are selectors, right? And what are some other selectors we can do besides just elements? Well, you can also do IDs. You see this H2 here has an ID. So if I apply an H2 rule, and let's change the background color to, let's do a dark salmon, and I apply this, you see all of my H2s change into that dark salmon background color. But this table of contents is a little different. I only want to change this one. So I give it a hashtag TOC, and that indicates that I'm selecting an ID. Again, the ID uses the hashtag in many cases to identify when you're using an ID. So ID TOC, and I can change this background color to be dark sea green. Refresh, and there you see that only applied to that one specific ID. I want that one to be dark green. Now what if I have a whole bunch of IDs that I want to kind of style the same, a whole bunch of elements I want to style the same, and I don't want to give each one an individual ID. I want to kind of give them all the same thing. We have these things called classes. IDs can only be used for a single element per name, but a class can be applied to many different elements of different types. And I can style that one class by using a dot notation. So dot blue. I have a class that I've applied to a number of different elements, and I called it blue. I gave it a class name of blue, and I'm going to style that now. So let's go ahead and we'll change the color of this blue, not columns, and let's go with a deep sky blue, and let's refresh. And let's take a look at what changed deep sky blue. Here you see my family members. Here you see Amber and Emily. Down here you see the matrix changed as well. So everything, this is a list item. Here's a couple other list items. Here's a heading. And all of those were changed by this class. So different things, multiple elements were changed by a single class rule. Now, I can get in, show you a couple other specific rules and ways to select items where we can get a little more specific. So we have tags. So if I say H2, every H2 will get this rule. If I say ID TOC, the one item that I have, given that ID 2, will become this rule, will follow this rule. So the most general to the most specific. And everything in between there we'll talk about, such as a class rule. So anything I give this class name to, dot blue, will get this rule. But now I can get even more specific, and this is called chaining. So I can say li.blue, and what this does is it will not apply to all the LIs, it will not apply to all the blues. It will only apply to a list item that has the blue class name. So if I refresh this, we now see that my family members is no longer blue, but Amber and Emily are still blue, and the matrix is still blue, because these are still both LIs that have the class name blue, whereas this, my family members, was an H2 or an H3, and since it didn't have, it's not an LI with the class name, it no longer gets the blue rule. And notice this list item, Jali, doesn't turn blue because it's not a list item with the class blue. So you see how that kind of makes things a little more specific. But I still have the blue impacting these list items, which you should be able to tell is in an unordered list. And in this list, which is an ordered list. So I can get even more specific by using another technique called nesting. So if I create a space between the two selectors, what's happening here is it's saying I want to style the LIs that have the blue class, but only the LIs with the blue class that are nested inside of the UL. So now when I refresh, you see the matrix is no longer blue because this LI with the class name blue is nested underneath an OL element. Up here, Amber and Emily stay blue because they are LI elements with the class name blue that are nested inside of a UL. So again, by creating a space between them, I can be more specific. I don't want all the ULs. I don't want all the LIs. I don't want all the LIs that have the class name blue. I only want the list items with the class name blue that are nested inside of an unordered list. You can kind of see how that can become very specific. So let's take a look at one more thing here. What if I want to style multiple things, right? What if there's a lot of different elements that I want to style all the same, but I don't want to go in and give them all different class names. So we can kind of do multiple selectors here. So if I want to do my H2s and my H1s and my H3s, all my headings that I did, right? I don't think I have any H4s, but we'll put them on here just in case. So notice the difference here. Now I've separated them with a comma. The comma indicates that I want to do H2s and H1s and H3s and H4s. So these are all going to get their own rules. So I'll give all of these headings their own color, and we'll do like a dim gray. And now you see when I scroll up here to the top, this is a heading 1, it's dim gray. This is a heading 2, it's dim gray. Heading 2, dim gray. Heading 2, dim gray. And we'll come down here to my family members. I think that was an H3 or an H4, and that becomes a dim gray. So you see one rule rules them all. H2s, H1s, H3s, they all get this rule, and I only had to write it one time because I used multiple selectors. All right, so that is the basics of how to use CSS selectors, how to do inline selectors, how to create a style element within your HTML page, and how to style multiple elements using different types of specifics, how to get at different types of selections. All right, hopefully that was useful. One more thing I want to do in the video before we go is show you the third way to connect CSS to your HTML. So this style element directly inside the file can be very useful because it's all in one side of one file. But you can see here already, just a little bit of styling I've done has already increased the size of my file. And you imagine if I continue to do lots of things, changing the fonts, changing the flow layout, changing lots of things about the page, this can become very large. So the question is there a better way of doing this? And it depends on what you're going to be doing, right? If you're going to have multiple pages and you want them all to be styled similarly, then this is not going to be very efficient because you're going to have to put all of this code into each of those pages. But if you want to be able to apply this to different pages to all have the same code, then what you can do is go ahead and create a new file. And we'll call this, I'm going to call it style.css. You can call it whatever you want. And you see how I changed this little hashtag symbol, style.css. And now what I can do is go back into my demo, take all this code that's inside the style, take that out of there, and come over here to my style page and just type it directly in there. All right? So the style just gets CSS. There's nothing else in here, and I don't need this style element anymore. What I need now is a link. The relationship is going to be a style sheet. The href is going to refer to that style.css that I created. We are going to give it a type. And the type is going to be text/CSS. Link relationship is style sheet. My href is the file name in the directory. And then the type is text.css. When I refresh this, we will see that nothing changed on my page. Even though there's no CSS anymore in here, there's nothing in here anymore, and yet the page is still styled. And we can also go in here, and if we go back into my page, and we kind of scroll down here to the bottom, I go to my All About Me, my secondary page, it's Demo 2, and you see that it's styled as well. It's got the blue background, my links have the orange, and the way I was able to achieve that is here on my Demo.2, I also linked it to the exact same style sheet. By putting this link into as many pages as I want, I can apply the same styles to multiple pages without having to rewrite all the same code. So you can see the level of efficiency that exists by being able to create my .css file and just attach it. The downside to this is sometimes the pages take a little longer to load the first time because it's got to access that separate file. But the nice thing is you can save yourself a ton of styling and time by just creating these style sheets and linking them to the multiple pages that exist within your web page, your website. All right, hopefully you found this useful and interesting. Let me know if you have questions.